There we go. So I'm a guest in this conversation here. I'm just thrilled to be here. The whole building thinking classrooms work wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for the generosity of teachers and the willingness and the courage of them to share in their practices and in my vision and so on and so forth. And if you read the book, all of the micro practices that are in there come from teachers sharing with me the specific ways that they have found to make thinking classrooms better in their rooms. The framework is really just a bunch of research that sort of gives us a direction to go in, but teachers still have to enact it and make it their own and find ways to optimize it within their particular setting. And I just love listening to teachers share how they're achieving that. So I hope you're okay with me being here listening. I have absolutely no thoughts that anything you would say would be anything but wonderful. So don't ever feel like I'm sitting there thinking, oh, that's not what the book says, because the book is based on a particular subset of research, and you are a different subset. And I'm hoping to learn some more from you. Thanks, Will.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for joining us. Again, the original idea here was, I thought it'd be great if a bunch of teachers who did this could just kind of come together and have some drinks and just chat about it and see what each other did, right? What iterations could come out of this thing. It ended up being there were a lot more people who were interested in doing that than I was expecting. I put that initial tweet out, and it was over 100 people had immediately tweeted within the 24 hours saying, yep, sign me up, sign me up, sign me up. And I thought, So this already has more structure than I thought it was going to. But that's nice because we have a deep well to draw from now. And I want to be as much participant as anything. So I'm gonna step out at this point and just kind of pass it on to the three first contributors, as we're calling them. And they have three elements they're going to talk about, and they've arranged how they're going to talk about it. But it's Jimmy Pai, Alex Overwijk, and Siobhan McComb who have graciously agreed to be the first session presenters. And at this point, the floor is yours to manage as you see fit. And thanks for doing it.
Awesome. Thanks, Will and Peter. So my name is Alex Overwijk. It's so nice to see so many people, that familiar faces and familiar names from Twitter. Will's asked us to speak on three different aspects of the thinking classroom. And so I'm going to do the first one. I'm going to actually speak about where students do this. And then Jimmy's going to speak on how we answer questions. And Siobhan's going to speak on how we do homework. And so I think the plan will be, we're going to just do a really short presentation each, I think. And then at the end of each one, if you want to ask any questions during it, you can just put them in the chat, and the other two people will kind of monitor those. And then after we've done our little spiel, we'll try to answer any questions. And then maybe we can have a little formal discussion about, or informal discussion about that particular item. And then we'll move on to the next one. So before I start talking about like, vertical non-permanent surfaces, which is like a super easy topic to talk about, which I'm thrilled about because I didn't have to do a whole lot of thinking about it. I do want to tell the story about meeting Peter for the first time. It was at CMESG. I think it's CMESG. I can't remember the acronym, but I was at it. It was in 2014 in Ottawa, which is where I'm from. And I was at it I was speaking as well. And I was speaking about spiraling curriculum, like not teaching in units anymore, teaching with tasks, trying to uncover curriculum instead of cover curriculum. And we already had kids working in groups and working on chart paper, sitting down in pods. And I got to hear Peter speak that weekend, and it was like, it resonated. It was like, to me, and we were doing it with what we call in Ontario, we call applied level students. So we were really at this point experimenting with spiraling just in our applied level classes because they were so tough to engage. And we were having some success, so we were out sharing it. And then listening to Peter speak about getting students standing up and working on whiteboards, like when I heard him speak the first time, he really just talked about the big three the first time I heard him speak, which is random groups, vertical surfaces, and good tasks. And I was like, and we weren't doing random groups. So that was another nice feature that we heard that weekend. But my initial thought right away was with the vertical surfaces, I was like, this is perfect. Now we can start doing these types of things with our academic classes. And we started trying to, from that point on, we started spiraling academic courses too. So he really pushed us, his ideas really pushed us into like making spiraling go to any class. And so I definitely appreciative of that. So like, you know, the idea of the sledgehammer, and it was great because when I heard him speak, I literally went away for a year and did vertical non-permanent surfaces, random groups, and kept using tasks. But then I started having all these other problems. Like assessment was a big one for me. Like I was still assessing and doing written tests, and it wasn't matching what we were doing every day. So, yeah. So to talk about like vertical non-permanent surfaces, like that's like Peter's research says that this was the best thing to do, right? Best for time on task, best for perseverance, time for first notation, time on task, eagerness and enthusiasm, amount of discussion, knowledge mobility, non-linearity of work. So all those things, his research showed that it was best for those. And sure enough, when you start using it, you'll see that. So after I heard Peter speak, I had so much crap around the outside of my room that literally within 2 or 3 days, I had managed to get all the filing cabinets out of my room, all the boxes of junk that was in my room, and stuffed it in another room. And I literally we went and got some shower board and cut it up into pieces. And we literally just leaned it against the windows and put it on a desk and leaned it against the wall. And we started getting kids to stand up and start working on it. And the enthusiasm and the engagement immediately went through the roof. So like my task is to talk about vertical non-permanent surfaces. So I put together a couple of pictures. I'm going to share my screen here if I can figure this out. Okay. All my wife's open tabs. Give me 1 second. And so, you know, this is the type of thing that we built initially, and we just leaned it up against the wall and had students work. So really it's about getting kids standing up and working on any kind of surface. So there's an example. Oops. Again, these are whiteboards that are leaning up against a window, students working on it. There's Jimmy's class, I believe. They're working outside on a nice day on same thing. They brought it out. There's students working on a window, really anything that you can get them to work on. You know, whiteboard is amazing too. They're making an amazing product. So I'll often use those if I don't have whiteboards, or I'll use them for the kids to graph on, or I'll just tape them to the whiteboards. This is, I think, Jimmy getting ready to construct a new room and put up whiteboards, which we've done at our school. We almost have all our math rooms now equipped with whiteboards all the way around them. In fact, we don't use real whiteboards. It's just shower board. It's super cheap from Home Depot. This is what my classroom looks like. So defronted room. I got 10 4x8 sheets of whiteboard around the room. Got Peter's poster of the 4 elements posted on my wall, so the kids can ask me questions about what we're doing. That's it full of students. And that's my classroom before it got painted. So there's these are two pictures from Jimmy. So I'm not sure if that's Jimmy's room in the top one, and then the bottom one I think is Jimmy doing a PD session in an atrium. So he's using all the windows and has teachers working there. Say again.
I can talk to that. I said I can talk to that if you want.
Sure.
So that bottom one was well, our school doesn't have great ventilation, and so it was super hot. So we just went straight to the atrium to do that. So that wasn't a PD or anything. That was just kids.
Nice.
Yeah.
So I built some mobile stations. So this thing that I built is in the shape of a T. So there's each group gets 6 feet of whiteboard. So you can put 3 on the end, and then there's 3 on one side and 3 on the other side. I don't know if I got a better, yeah, I get a better idea of it there. So it fits in the elevator, goes through a door. I just didn't want excuses from people that saying, oh, I can't do it in my room, right? So I built 2 of these. So that's 18 students that you can get up, just stick them in the middle of your room. And then again, here's a whiteboard attached to a bulletin board. This is me in Seattle doing it with a bunch of teachers where we just threw it up around the room. Yeah, and then that last, so this is I threw together I threw a video in here. I just thought you might want to see it in action. So this one actually has the whiteboard in the middle as well, but it'll just give you an idea if this is going to play. Just gives you an idea what it looks like live. And if you're a seasoned vet, you live this every day. You get the idea. So yeah, so get students standing up, working on whiteboards, and I'm relentless with it. My kids do it all day, every day. So during the pandemic, we're hybrid. So I did want to mention that. So we're still able to get the kids up working. We're social distancing while we're doing it. So it's a little different in that they have to be super careful about the social distancing. They're wearing masks. So we see half our kids every other day for 4 hours, and the other half are online. And so the kids that are live with us for 4 hours, they're in the same group all day. They all get a marker because they can't be sharing markers. So I just tell them only one can write at a time. And it's going okay. The challenge is keeping them social distanced, of course. But 4 hours is full on. Like they're exhausted. The last 15, 20 minutes, they're exhausted. And so we go 9 to 1, and I send them home to make their mindful notes after that. I'm like, okay, go figure out what we did. But it's going okay. So were there any questions?
Yeah, there was a question, and I think you started to answer it. It's about how it works with COVID social distancing restrictions. And I'll let Al speak to that, to what he does in his classroom, but I will also share a document that I basically made, that I was basically working on it probably like throughout the summer because I knew this was coming. And then towards like September, when I was about to finish it, I was also in a email thread where Peter shared some thoughts, and that's where some of these ideas also come from, because it aligned nicely with what I was planning to do. So I'm gonna copy and paste it in here, and Al can speak to
Yeah,
what
so
he does.
super appreciative, Jimmy, putting all the work into that document. It definitely helped us convince our principal that we should be still doing it. Yeah, so doing it, so the maximum number of kids we have in our class is 15. So it's 5 groups of 3 at most. So with 5 groups, I can spread them around the room pretty well. And I basically have them in the person writing on the board, the other 2 people are back separated 6 feet and back 6 feet. So they're kind of in a triangle. And I just talked to them about, being courteous about if you want to move into the whiteboard, that you actually talk about them first. So like I said, it's going okay. Lots of reminders to social distance though. Yeah, and kids are great about wearing their masks. So, and because it's hybrid, where I'm able to do it. If it was 30 kids, it would be impossible, obviously. I don't know if that answers the
And
question at all.
I'll just add to that, that I actually taped X's on my floor because the biggest challenge I found, like they're very cooperative. They wanted to be 6 feet apart, but then they'd get excited about what was happening on the board. So just putting the X's on the floor, it didn't mean they had to stand on it, but it just gave them that indication of what is 2 meters. And sorry to get metric on everybody. And just to really keep that awareness, because that's the challenge when they get excited about what they're working on.
I'll also add too, because my situation is slightly different in that I also have the kids working in the room, and I kind of follow what I wrote in the document there, where I have also the floor taped and marked, and yeah, exactly, X's on the floor, everyone's own marker. I also have the kids have their own eraser, which is just a piece of cloth that I went to the dollar store and I cut into smaller pieces, and they all just keep it for, you know, however long. And then because I was gonna say, back when talking about vertical non-permanent surfaces, I think Al has been able to, just being in the same room in the same school throughout this time, whereas I've kind of went to different schools sort of throughout this time, and so I've had to set up different spaces and also just made use of whatever was available there, which included, like, you know, blackboards or shelves, and you know, just like spaces where I would put up like a whiteboard, or, you know, make my own and stick it up, which is one of the pictures you saw back there. But right now for COVID, um, I have the kids working out in the classroom, but I also have kids working at home. Um, so what I do is I have a virtual whiteboard that those kids are working on, and then I would circle around the room, and then that's just my additional board that I'm also looking at, which is on the computer. Except it's actually a couple of groups on the computer. So I must say I don't do as great of a job with the virtual kids, which I try to refer to them as VIPs, our virtual incredible peers is what I call them for the kids. And yeah, so that's how I've been working about the VMPS in with COVID. And then should I start talking about the next one, or maybe there are people with more questions? Yeah, I think people are just sharing, which is great.
Yeah.
And so I'm just going to move on to the next section, which is how we answer questions in the thinking classroom. So I'll just start with some, I guess, definitions of what Peter lays out, but some of my thoughts about them too. So proximity questions, as well as stop thinking questions and keep thinking questions, are the 3 general types of questions. The proximity questions are just sort of like the ones that students ask because the teacher is close. It's kind of like more about playing a student than being an active learner. So it's kind of like also like a way to reinforce this sort of institutional hierarchy of power, and kind of fulfilling this unspoken didactic contract of how students are supposed to behave while they're in the classroom, and basically allowing the teacher to also reaffirm their, you know, position of power of being the authority figure. So that's sort of like the effect of the proximity question and why those are asked. I mean, there can still be good questions there, which I guess I can maybe touch on later. And then, but the stop thinking questions are basically ones that they ask so they can just stop thinking. Usually, like yes or no kind of questions, like, "Am I right here?" Or it could be like unrelated to the problem, like they start asking you about how much this is worth, or does this count? Do I really have to stay on the at the board or something like that? So those would be like stop thinking questions, because I mean, as the name sort of indicates, it stops them from actually thinking. Keep thinking are just something that helps the students actually continue learning. So it could be like clarifying something they don't quite understand, which they don't actually have to ask you. They could also ask each other, or uh, you know, reflect. But that's something to work toward. So the main thing. is knowing which is which. So I would say that like identifying the type is more like uh, in context, and it's sort of situated, and it's all sort of tied together with knowing your students ultimately. Um, but there's also some, you know, clear indicators for knowing that a question that a student asks is really not something that's going to help them. And generally, that's most of their questions. Um, so uh, yeah, what else did I put to talk about here? So I think whether or not they are stop thinking questions or keep thinking questions also relates to what goals there are, like what your specific goals are. So for the beginning classes, usually when I'm working on building culture, so I focus a lot on sort of culture building problems and tasks that are, you know, easy to access and not necessarily curricula, so that you don't immediately create this sort of hierarchy that they already sort of used to in the past. And so at those kind of times, I focus my debriefs a lot on mathematical processes, which in Ontario are things like problem solving and connecting and those kind of things. And then I try to highlight as much as possible students that perhaps have not had positive experiences with that in the past, and also highlight the kinds of questions they use over time. And then so that is sort of like working towards building better ways of thinking about questions and asking questions and things like that. Um, but yeah, like I also think like the types of questions, the types of tasks that you do also is directly related to how many questions they're going to ask and whether or not they're going to be mostly stop thinking kind of questions. Like for example, what I mean is like if you have primarily a sequence of closed questions versus like an open question, then sort of like the kinds of questions that come from the students are going to be different because instead of saying is this right, you can't just say, you know, take a look at your strategies or uh, you know, like there's if it's like a closed question, then there's only one answer. There's really not as many different ways that you can mitigate those kind of things. Let's see. um, I think generally my work with these kinds of student questions is about uh, reducing the improving the quality of questions, which of course also relates to other aspects of the thinking classroom like flow and so on and so forth. And like the other things I talked about, like difficulties of the task, negative impacts of perceptions of evaluation, for example, or past experiences and so on and so forth. So that thing about the task that I was talking about before relates to kind of anticipating your students' questions a little bit as well. Um, but yeah, generally, what I would generally do um, is I'm usually joining the group and I'm mainly there to listen and interpret their conversations. So I would generally say like, or huh, or cool, or asking them some questions about what they did specifically, and then sort of step away. I don't know. It's kind of hard to describe. Like my section doesn't really have nice pictures for me to show you. Um, like, I guess generally a way to put it is like at least for me, I think for everyone is going to be different how you handle these kinds of things. But for me personally, I like to sort of arrive while I can still listen, and then leave when I'm not heard. So it's a little bit easier for me because I'm you know, like basically about the same height as the students, and I'm I still kind of look young, I guess, for the next couple of years, and so I can kind of arrive without them noticing that much, and then leave. Uh, sort of, I sort of usually try to leave when I already know that they're on the right track, or starting to think about the right things, and they don't need me anymore. If they're already starting to have a conversation with each other, then that's sort of when I would be able to leave. Um, but I think in general, um, the ways that you can tackle these kinds of questions, besides of course just not answering at all, is I think generally redirection and to elaborate. So redirection meaning like to themselves. So they ask you something, and then you say something like, "What do you think?" or "What part of what you did made you think that?" or things like that. Or you can redirect them to others in their own group. Like this, I tend to do if I notice that like a student need a voice in the group. I usually try to highlight them or pick up something that Dave said, and then so that they can enter back into the group as a active participant. Um, or I can redirect them to like another group, like in the room by just like sort of glancing to the side while I'm sort of responding. So like, does that always work? And then I have a quick glance to the right side. So I think even like this one is like this particular section is tough because I think there's a lot of little things that teachers do that it's kind of hard to just describe, but even just like as you're talking to them, just looking to the side sort of prompts their attention to, oh, he's looking over there. Maybe he saw something similar, which is also another thing that relates to maintaining and flow and things like that. But the other part is elaborate. So um, from their thinking, is this right? To asking them about, look, is what right? Like, can you tell me a little bit more about what you did? Or like get them to elaborate on why it's useful for their learning to be able to think about these kind of questions that you're not answering and things like that. But yeah, like I think generally, I think the strategy is be busy or hard to find um, when they're asking questions that ultimately are not going to keep them on the path of thinking, because the more you sort of reduce the number of questions they ask, the more hopefully opportunity they're going to engage with the questions themselves. So now, as I say that, maybe I can see if there are any questions, which there are no questions.
Oh, I've got one, and since I organize the thing, I get to
Perfect.
ask it. Mine is, since you're talking about asking the questions, do you think over time students are increasingly less inclined to hunt you down and ask you how to do it as they get more familiar with the thinking classroom, or do you find yourself fending off the same questions the entirety of the year? Are they still trying to disengage from thinking, or are they adopting that more and more?
Yeah, I can answer it a little bit. I mean, I think and I think others can answer to this as well. I think in general, their quality of questions do improve. Uh, but I do think that still there's going to be one or two students who, for whatever reason, still do ask those kinds of questions. But there's certainly a lot less, especially if they have positive experiences. Like kids that ask questions of this, is this right, have a black and white sort of view of mathematics, right? So for tackling some like that particular student, not tackling them physically, but tackling how to improve that, then it's more about expanding their definitions of mathematics and representations and things like that. Whereas like another student who's asking a different question that is stop thinking, that's like just about like, oh, why do we have to do this every day, or what is math good for, then they have a different kind of sort of mindset that in order to tackle that really does require you to know the students a little bit more and then trying different things. So anyway, I do think our ultimate goal is to improve that over time, and it does, in my experience, it varies from student to student, and the specific strategies as to how to do that also varies from student to student, as you all probably know, even without thinking about the thinking classroom framework.
Jimmy, do you ever get, sorry, I'm echoing. Hopefully you can hear me. Do you ever get students just saying, oh, he won't answer that? Like they start to get to know you. I find that for myself, she won't answer that.
Yeah, they definitely
like to each other. Yeah.
Yeah. And I
So
do find that they
there's
ask
also
each
that.
other the questions more, and that's sort of I think it's a process in improving their own qualities of questions, because they're starting to recognize either implicitly or explicitly, because I talk to them about it, about, what is a useful question in order to help me keep thinking, as opposed to what is a question that's going to get me out of doing this.
Right.
Jimmy, there's a couple of questions in the chat. There's how to get both student and parent buy-in, and then are you able to uncover the entire curriculum using the thinking classroom framework?
Yeah, I mean, you guys can jump in as well, but I'll quickly answer these two, and then maybe you guys can say something too. So student and parent, so student buy-in is the most important, I believe, because they're the ones that relay their experiences, because the parents won't ultimately experience it no matter how much you talk to them about it. So that's the student experience is really what I try to focus on, and it really has to do with that time that you spend on building a positive experience. Like they love it by the end of the day, like starting with the task that it's easier for them to access, and that they have lots of successes throughout, and perhaps it's even auto differentiated, so they can continue going without having to rely on the teacher. But also yeah, like through that, that improves their experiences. And I'm also talking about improving specific student experiences. So you may have kids that think of themselves as not quote unquote math people, and then so I really try to catch that as soon as I can, and try to uplift them as much as I can throughout those beginning days, and then continue to look for opportunities to do that, so that they do have a positive experience. And then over time, they start to sort of align their current positive experience with what I'm doing in the classroom, which them knowing it's thinking classroom or not, it helps them uh, you know just enjoy things better. Now with parents, um, I usually try to, of course, after the kids have had a few positive experiences, I try to unpack some of it, but I don't explicitly throw research at them, because I find that is usually not helpful, because they'll just try to find specific words to pick at you for. But I try to emphasize, the thinking is what we're focusing on, and talking about positive experiences, and talking about those kind of things that you'll get parents to nod along with, and then sort of build that sort of forward. So that's what I'll say to that. What was the other question again?
I just comment, Jimmy,
Yeah,
about
okay,
the
go ahead.
parent, the parent thing. If you look at the front curriculum, the front part of our curriculum, it talks about problem solving, connecting, all those processes. And like, I'm always selling that to parents. I'm like, the processes is what I'm looking for. And the curriculum, the actual content is the vehicle to get at those things. Yeah. So I can't get at those things if I'm just having them do all the content stuff, and there's not opportunity to justify, to defend, to make hypotheses. So I'm always like, I always sell it like that. And I'm like, isn't that what you want your kid doing at school? Thinking like, you start explaining, mimicking to them, and avoiding, you start explaining that sort of stuff to them, and usually you get a little bit of buyback or buy-in. But someone else commented too that they want their kids to be taught like they were taught, right? And times have changed, and you just have to try to sell them on that. So we don't really have a problem at our school anymore, because it's so widespread in our school that there's so many teachers doing it that it's the kids are pretty used to it now.
Yeah, I think like ultimately, like the specific ways that you're going to respond to a parent is going to vary, because they're going to come from different places, and they'll have different ways of refuting. So, but I find that generally, if you focus on, your goal is to improve their ability to think, their ability to problem solve. I know that in the States, you guys have some sort of front matter as well with your standards, and then just like us, we have problem solving and those kinds of things. And I also explicitly talk about that as an explicit goal in the classroom too. So and I usually send like these emails home as well, emphasizing those aspects, maybe not emphasizing specific what we do in the classroom, but talking about these are our goals. And then usually that makes any subsequent conversations a little better. Sorry, I think I cut off Siobhan maybe.
That's okay. I'll just add to that. And this is coming up a bit in the chat as well. And that's relationship building, right? With the students and with the parents, that once you build that trust, they'll pretty much go anywhere with you. And my big solution was changing schools to teach at the school that Al's at. So he'd already done a lot of the hard work. So I'm definitely benefiting from the work he put into that. And then the other question that had come up was about if you can cover the whole curriculum with this. I'm actually finding it easier because the kids are so engaged and they're just building off each other all the time, that I'm actually getting through curriculum a lot more quickly than I did before, and able to add in lots of those non-curricular tasks like partway through the year, because we do have time and the students are just building on what they know and they're really learning it. So it's actually saving me time. I don't know if you guys have some comments on that in terms
I mean,
of covered.
I'll also add that I think all three of us are not, the three of us saying things right now are also spiraling through our courses. So I think that helps a lot also, because spiraling relies on the sort of natural connections that students are building. And these natural connections, I feel, just come so much quicker once they are ready and willing to think. And then therefore a lot of the sort of uncovering of the content just goes smoother. And the debriefs are sort of better, not better, I guess all of them are good, but more efficient, I suppose.
Yeah.
Was there another question?
Yeah, I think those were the questions for now.
Yeah.
So I can go into.
Yeah, I think I see a Dina asked, how would implementing the thinking classroom look like if I start in the middle of the school year? So Siobhan, if you want to tackle that and then just continue, that would probably work.
Yeah, I'd say jump in, that put some non-curricular tasks in there and get them really be prepared to spend a bit of time taking away from your curriculum to get them working that way, but knowing that it'll save some time later on. I don't see any challenge with doing it partway through. I don't know if anyone has anything to add on that.
I don't want to take too much of your time because I know that you're speaking last and we're already down to 8:15, but I learned about thinking classroom kind of coming into it from backwards, my own exploration. And it was like, one day I'm like, I'm just doing it. Like I had talked to enough people, I'd read enough about the elements, I'd seen enough webinars, and I went out to Home Depot that weekend. I bought a bunch of dry erase boards. I tacked them up around my room. I bought a bunch of markers. I had found some good non-curricular tasks from Alicia Burtis's website. And I had 2 weeks of just non-curricular stuff ready to go. And I spent those 2 weeks learning how to do it myself, and also creating the questions that would be the curricular math going forward. So, but I'm not afraid to upset administrators either. So,
yeah, I mean,
do it at your own peril.
I'll also just add really quickly. I met Peter at the same CMEF. Actually, it was not CMESG, but CMEF, Canadian Math Education Forum in 2014, and we saw him like I think it was like May or June, and then we got back to the classroom, and I just started right away. So that's not even mid-year; that's like at the end, and even there, I think I saw a good improvement in just how they think, how they interacted with each other. So definitely worth doing, no matter where you are. I think in the school year.
Ditto here for me. It was like the last 6 weeks of the school year when we saw him, and I jumped right in, and it was great.
Okay, so the last section we were going to talk about was the check your understanding questions. And when we were looking at the three parts that we were going to talk about tonight, I actually asked if I could do that one, not because by any means am I an expert on it, and just reading that chapter really gave me some things to think about. So I started reading the chapter with all the things that the homework for marks, all those behaviors that kids have around that. I'm just nodding my head. Yeah, I knew that. Feeling pretty good. I got this. And a few years ago, I took a leave and went and taught in another country for a couple of years. And at this school, homework was for marks. And I just see kids sitting right outside the classroom And I missed that memo, fortunately. So I didn't give the marks. My visa was delayed and I missed that PD. So I lucked out of it there. But you just see them outside of classes, sort of passing papers back and forth, madly copying. And that's kind of what homework was there. And not particularly a new thing. My mom tells a story about one class that she was in. My mom's name's Diane, and there were two other Dianes in the class, and they sat together. So the way they did the homework was they divided it amongst the three of them. And whenever the teacher asked for a question, looked in their direction and said, Diane, whichever one of the Dianes had done the question would answer that. So that was a few years ago. So this has been going on for a long time. And I had that sort of all in my head that, yeah, I know that's not right, but as I'm reading through, I started thinking about what is right. And in the spring with the lockdown, with my students being 100% from home, I was really focused on giving them feedback on everything. And so I really built up that if they're doing work on their own, I don't want them to feel that they're just like sending it into a void. I wanted them to feel more like we were doing it together. So one of my ways was like giving lots and lots of feedback. And then reading through, I just realized the part I'm missing is that in between. And this is my next step. It's that check your understanding question. So I'm thinking about what my students are experiencing in my class. So they're doing all this great work up on the whiteboards. They're working with their groups. They're looking at other groups. We're consolidating at the end. I'm sending them home to do mindful notes. And then I'm doing things where I'm giving them feedback. But they're really missing that sit down, just do a few questions where the answers are provided, and just that exact, like I love the wording of it, that check your understanding, because that's exactly what I'm finding they need, is just to do those few questions. Can I do this on my own? I've had this great experience working with my classmates, but now before I submit anything for feedback, I just want to check in with myself. And that's my next step in this process. So that's just a sort of brief overview about that part. But are there any questions or comments that we want to bring out in here?
So I just want to mention that check your understanding and we don't call it homework, I know necessarily, but check your understanding. I like that it really puts the onus on the students, right? This is for you and you will use it. So it's not that there isn't homework or that there aren't things students can do. It's just not such a big piece of the teacher's experience with the student. It's more the student's experience with themselves, which I think is just such a critical point and such a hard one to convince parents and other teachers of. But it's such a salubrious transition if you can pull it off. There's a lull.
Yeah. Did Jimmy or Al, do you have anything to add to that, or you?
I was just gonna say silence is golden, but I guess we can respond to some of the people's thoughts here, or maybe other people want to talk. I mean, maybe this is going to be a casual conversation over drinks after all, if other people want to talk. Of course, we need drinks first.
I've got myself covered anyway. So I'll just ask, because you three are the session contributors, so this is kind of your thing. The original conception of this was just as long as it's teachers sharing their techniques with other teachers about the framework, that's the point of this thing. So I am really okay with this thing being a wide open floor about other people sharing how they've addressed those three elements. I don't care if we talk about other elements, frankly. There's so much to unpack. It didn't make sense to say, hey, could each of the three of you talk about 14 things? That seemed a bit much. But if people want to ask specific questions, and I know there are a handful of people who are brand spanking new to thinking classroom. And so maybe if those people have some questions about how to get started or anything, I don't care. But we've got the 10 minutes at least if people want to just have a conversation.
Jessica asked, are there issues with students not doing the check your understanding problems? Can you elaborate a bit? Maybe you can hear your voice. What do you mean by issues? Do you mean like a marks issue or like?
No, I just like the practice, you know, you want them to practice and apply what they're learning and, you know, go through that. And I'm just wondering, you know, have a bunch of students that just don't do it, you know, and then are missing out on that, or I'm just imagining, I haven't been able to dive into this part yet. So this is something I'm really interested in, want to dive into. But I have that fear of, you know, my students who already don't do stuff. Now, if I'm not grading it, if there's no incentive, I bother doing it.
Did you guys want to take that real quick or?
Well, I mean, assessment is such a touchy thing. It's so, you know, that is a struggle with every class I teach, to get them to stop thinking about marks. And it's about learning. And I think the framework, if you're persistent and relentless with it, I think you can ultimately get there. It usually takes me 4 or 5 weeks before I get there with the class where they stop worrying about, oh, does this count? And one of the words out of my mouth all the time is everything counts. It all matters, you know? So I really try to sell it that we're on this journey, collective journey together, and we're all in this together about trying to learn to be good thinkers and learn to be good people. And so I don't know how else to say it other than like, assessment is so hard. And if you can get the kids to self-assess on stuff, the more you can get them to do that, I think the better. And help let them set up what is, like Peter talks about, like the three rubric, you know, like what's not so good, what's really good, and leave the open middle and let them pick where they think they are. Yeah, assessment in my room is definitely messy, just like the student work is.
Yeah, assessment might have to be a topic of itself one night with several practitioners, because I think there's going to be a lot to gain in all the different perspectives and applications. It's such a gnarly beast. It happens to be one of my favorite areas to discuss, but it is a dense one and takes a lot of unpacking. So there were some good questions from newer practitioners or would-be practitioners.
I just want to add on to go back to the check your understanding questions. And I think the reality is there are going to be some kids that don't do it. And that might be right. They don't do it at the beginning. They may build into doing it. But I think it's about making it so that it's for them and it's important to them. So again, this is my next step. So I haven't done a lot with this yet. But the idea that this is your chance before you submit anything to me, this is your chance to just do a few questions and make sure you've got it for yourself. And I know a lot of my students, I think, would really benefit from that, and they'd be really happy to have that. And I'm not going to make it huge, just a few questions after every lesson, that before they're submitting anything, they've had that opportunity. And sorry, Will, you were saying about what was in the chat?
I say so much, I don't keep track of it. I noticed people were saying that they want to, you know, employ the framework, but they come from very traditional math departments, very traditionally math minded, maybe communities or whatever. Honestly, I think it's probably been any one of us who have tried to push into this framework has probably experienced that. So Don't think you're alone, but you will, if you do it, you commit to it, and you start to see the results, no one's going to push back after that, because it's just going to speak for itself.
Yeah,
Will,
I agree with Will. Oh, sorry, someone else is speaking. Go ahead.
Yeah, can I just add a bit to that, Will? Hi, everyone. So I put in the chat there a paper that Peter Liljedahl wrote called "What Teachers Want," and it talks about teachers, you know, from being resistant to open to change, to wanting to look for changing one thing in their classroom without being disturbed, to the fully kind of reflective teacher inquiry. I've found that, you know, you're not going to force anyone to change. You really just have to build it and try to get their attention that way. You know, when you walk down the hall and you see the energy in your own classroom, it just kind of gets attention. I will say this: I work with a lot of teachers in the past as a consultant, and I've talked about this framework a lot. And I encounter a lot of teachers who are happy with how their classes are organized and the way they teach, and they want to just change one thing to increase their problem solving in their room, and they'll ask for that advice, but they say, I don't want to change anything else. I still want to give the package of notes to the kids for them to fill in the blanks, but can you help me with problem solving? And I let them know that if you want kids to think and then you do the thinking for them, like that's a juxtaposition that just will not coexist. The thinking will get pulled back to the norm of your classroom, and the kids will know to just wait, right? If you're going to provide kind of packages for them. So my advice is, while it's scary, you do really have to jump in. And I think somebody mentioned, just start with the 3 basics, right? The 3 foundational kind of starting points, and go from there. You'll want to build on that, but it does take kind of a full commitment. It's scary, but very freeing, right? It kind of frees up your time to be an observer in the room, to listen, and just to take a lot of pictures.
Well, I don't actually take a whole lot of pictures now, but I blame that on my grad school background. But anyway, the question about with the culture of the rest of the math department, I think to add to what Lam had already said, I think I think your specific ways of dealing with it is going to range. I think it comes down to is do they require that you are lockstep with what they're doing? If they don't, then I think all you have to do is really focus on creating these positive experiences for students. And then once the students have positive experiences, that will breed more positive experiences. And then that'll work out as long as, I don't know, unless you have, I mean, again, each case is going to range depending on what you mean by not only tradition and approach, but how they see you as a colleague, or if you're right next door to someone, or if they're too loud, you're making them, or their quiet rooms louder or whatever. I think your specific ways of dealing with it is going to be different, but if you focus on just making sure that the kids have a positive experience, that will, like others have said, sort of eventually spread.
And I think also, if you're the only one in the school that wants to do something, it can be a bit lonely and a bit challenging. But if you can find someone else in your district at another school who's doing it, then at least you have something to build on. And Al can probably add a bit to this, if starting with those classes that it's not working. Whatever you're doing right now really isn't working for the kids. And that's
I think someone brought that up. I think Rob brought that up in the chat. Rob brought that up in the chat. Like, it's pick a course that no one else wants, right? Like, pick something that there's only one course of, and go for it yourself and hit it out of the park and have people go, what's going on over there, right? I think that's good advice. And then I think Carmen brought something up too. If you're in a department that struggles or doesn't want to change, that just find one partner, right, that's willing to do it, and find a course that you can both teach, and go for it. I know that, like, I can only say this because I experienced this with spiraling, in that when we started, it was me and one other person trying it with one course, because we were so disappointed with the engagement from our students that we were like, let's just throw everything we have out the window and try anything. So finding someone that you could do it with is a great idea. And then, of course, Twitter now, right? We really have this whole family out there that we can support, that will support us as well, answer our questions and help us.
I'm going to jump in there just because it's 8:30. I'm going to piggyback off the Twitter thing. I was really loud and obnoxious and annoying, and I was sending a lot of messages out there to a lot of people about this, and not once was I rebuffed. So Al's right. If there's a community out there, and you don't half believe in this thing, so they want you to be happy with it. It seems like almost as much as you want to be happy with it as a teacher. So it's 8:30. This thing was slated. Oh, sorry, 8:30 Central, 9:30 Eastern. I'm the kind of person who likes to close meetings early. This topic would be the only thing I would break that rule for. So I will leave it up to you, fair members, if you would like to keep going, or there is, I should say, there's the next one is December 3rd. I don't think a time, there was a time, I think same time, December 3rd at the same time. Michael Pruner, Kirsten Dick, did I say her last name right? Okay, good. And Kevin Cumming. We're going to be the 3 people, and that's as much as I know at this point. So they'll pick their topics and all that, but it will be December 3rd at the same time, 8:30 Eastern PM. So I'll leave to the rest of you.
Thanks so much for organizing this, Will.
Oh, you're welcome. Let me ask, are people interested in a second session before we do it? Okay, it sounds like this is good. Okay, good. Awesome. Well, I learned a lot, and many thanks to Jimmy, Al, and Siobhan for being the first 3 to just put it out there. So I genuinely appreciate this. Is exactly what I was hoping for. People are saying their farewells. So it was nice seeing so many of you and hearing so many voices from people I've interacted with so much. I guess we'll take this opportunity to just bid our farewells and see you in, what, 2 weeks?
Thanks for organizing, Will. It was great to be part of this.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it was selfish. I've been wanting this for myself, to learn from other people. So it was just purely selfish.
Okay, and I'm seeing like 3 things here about choosing tasks. So.
Oh, people are saying in the comments what topics they'd like. Yeah, there were a couple, as I've been reading the book again, there were a couple items that that have jumped out to me that would be good just as itself, like one element, but multiple people talking about it, like bring your favorite tasks, any topic, any grade level. I just think people would get a kick out of seeing what that looks like, because we will immediately be able to envision what the traditional version of that, doesn't matter what grade level it is. I already know what the 30 questions on that worksheet are going to be. So if people bring their favorite reinvention of a task, I think that'd be a fun hour to spend.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then again, assessment's like my favorite thing to talk about. I'm so opinionated about it. So that could be its own multiple sessions, I feel like, there. But I think you guys were wise to say maybe that's not the best opening session topic.
Well, I mean, I love talking about assessment as well, but it's definitely a contentious topic, or potentially contentious. So
3rd date, right, Peter? That's what you keep telling people. 3rd date topic.
Yeah, that's always my line.
Yeah.
I don't talk about assessment on a first date.
No.
And I'm okay, and this would be great if people here want to brainstorm. I'm okay staying away from those early elements because, you know, visually random groups, and you can talk about the different ways to visually randomize a group, but once you have a list, you don't need to beat that one to death. So
you know, the thing about visually random groups, though, I do think that it's one of the most powerful ones, though, because of the equity piece. Like I really think that people need to hear all that message, that it's because to me that really is a big equalizer. And I used to select groups differently before I met Peter, so it's made a big difference.
No, I think it was a good idea for you to pick one from the beginning and then one from the middle, and I think that was intentional, right? I mean, you didn't say it, but it probably was.
It was, yeah, it was by design. I didn't think about, I was picking the ones I wanted to talk about first, and then you pushed back on some of them, and then okay, maybe I'll be a little more.
Well, I mean, the only one I pushed back on was the assessment. I mean, that one I'd love to talk about, of course, but I just think could be tough for a first time.
I also think, just strategically, because I would like to see this go on as a series in kind of a long form way. We do have a couple, there's a reasonable enough portion of the attendees who are just looking to learn about this thing. And so if you start talking about kind of the finesse items, those maybe the micro moves or even the micro moves, they're going to lose kind of the bigger sense, I feel like. So I think it's good to talk about, it is good to talk about how you visually randomize groups. And I think bringing the equity piece is a really important reason why it's an important element. Sorry, someone's calling me.
Yeah, I think
random groups is also the one practice that teachers are most afraid of, I find.
Yeah. I've always meant to ask you about that because like my district is so big into like the Kagan grouping strategies, and you know, and I know there's always competing research on any topic, but my experience has always been that VRG has been effective, and I do like the equity element. That's always been the most attractive part. So I was going to ask you about that sometime. But. Well, I appreciate what you three did. The three of you who will be speaking next time, I think, no, Pruner's gone. That's okay. If you guys want to figure out the three elements, or I can pick three, or two, or whatever. I mean, there's always more to talk about, so you can pick whatever pieces you want. Just shoot me an email because I want to make the next flyer here with the topics and then the date and all that kind of stuff. So.
Cool.
All right, Peter, thanks for letting us use this account. Do you want to keep using a Simon Fraser one, or do you want me to use a different one?
It's up to you. The way I do it is I would send you a different link the next time, because the Simon Fraser one, it allows me to use the same link all the time, but then I lose security on it.
My thing is, if you're not going to be able to attend them all, if you're gonna need to not be here, you're always going to have to be the first one on.
Yeah. So it'd be better if you could do it. If you have Zoom that gives you an hour and allows you to record.
Yeah, I think I can use my district Zoom, which will let me do that. My school district Zoom.
Yeah.
Or I'm gonna. We'll see what they say.
There's also been a few in the chat, a few people who have offered to do certain topics. I don't know, you might want to just look through there and see if there's others for future session.
And that reminds me, you'll have this recording, right, Peter? This is going to go to you.
It might go to me, but it might go to you as well.
Because you pressed record, Will.
So I'm not sure where it ends up, but you can save the chat.
Yeah.
Regardless of where the recording goes. The recording also gives you a chat, but if you click on those three dots at the bottom of the right of the chat window, you can save the chat.
Yeah, which I am going to do, but there's been a lot of people. I can think of at least 15 or 20 people who were going to be here tonight and then couldn't, and they want to see it. So if it goes, maybe I'll see if I get it.
If the recording goes to me, I will put it in a folder and send you the link so that you can download.
Great. And I'm going to try and then if any of you had resources you want to share, I'll post those too. If not, that's fine too. I got to figure out where I'm going to store it and share it anyway. All right. Well, thanks for hosting, and thanks everyone for contributing and attending.
Bye everyone.
Thanks everyone.
Good to see you.
Cheers.